in 2 years' time, 20 to 25% of digital revenue may end up being conversation assisted. And if you are not tinkering with this technology today, knowing fully well that it will take you some time to perfect it for your use cases and your site, you are left behind.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Commerce Experience, where we're giving away the tools and insights necessary to thrive in the ever-evolving space that is commerce. I'm your host, Elena Senior Manager of Community and Social Media at Bloomreach, and today I'm joined by Vikas Jha, VP of Engineering, Conversational Commerce at Bloomreach. He's a former Director of Engineering, Display Advertising at Google. Vikas was most recently the founder of Radiance Commerce, which was acquired by Bloomreach in 2023. So we're so excited to have him and his amazing team on board. And today we're getting a special look into the world of conversational commerce, what it is, why it matters, and how it is shaping the future of our industry. And with all of your experience on this topic, that's new for many. I'm really looking forward to your perspective today. So Vikas, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Elena. I'm so excited to be here.
When Radiance Commerce started 7 years ago, you were focused on conversational commerce from the beginning. But during that time, AI was obviously not as advanced as it was today. So can you talk a little bit about your experience in the early days and maybe some roadblocks that you saw along the way?
I think you're exactly right. When we started, roughly about 7 years ago, conversational commerce was indeed the problem we tried solving first. And in particular, by the way, we were part of the first batch of chatbot companies that came around roughly around that time. And interestingly, all of those companies were built on Facebook Messenger platform. And Facebook Messenger had the most well-developed API to build chatbots on. So we were also very messenger focused back then. And the particular use case we wanted to tackle was this pre-purchase shopping assistant use case. And after trying that for some time, what we realized was that the AI that was available back then, and remember, we were talking about 7 years ago, it just wasn't good enough to support the specific shopping assistant type of use cases we were trying to solve. Interestingly, it was good enough to do customer support type of use cases. But we were very interested in this sort of pre-purchase, help the user find a product and help them guide to a purchase kind of a use case. And the AI just was very lacking. So then after some time, we pivoted to doing conversational marketing on messaging channels like SMS, Messenger, Instagram. We still use the AI, but in a much more narrow way to sort of assist marketing messages and guide the user in sort of narrow paths towards the purchase.
So what I'm hearing is that you kind of pivoted to more of like that MarTech product, and basically the technology wasn't ready yet, which is totally understandable, but essentially now it is. So things have changed a lot.
Back then, the state-of-the-art natural language processing, NLP, technology basically worked on identifying user intent based on what the user is typing or saying, and then for example, the technology we used was an open source platform called Rasa, which was this NLP library. And what that helps you do is to identify what the user is trying to do, and so-called intents, and then also entities. So, for example, if I say, "Hey, I want to buy a red dress," buying is the intent and red dress is the entity or the keyword that the NLP technology has identified. But the problem was that you had to pre-decide what are the intents you are trying to understand from the user's input. And then the responses that you could provide for those intents were always these pre-canned responses. So now imagine if you go to ChatGPT, and if ChatGPT is trying to classify whatever you're typing into some small set of types of questions, let's say 30, 50, 100, and it's giving you canned responses for each of those questions, it just wouldn't be the ChatGPT that we know today and love. So I think those were some of the limitations that now fast forward, a couple of years ago, ChatGPT became sort of this very magical experience for users. You go in and type your questions and it really reads your mind and gives you answers. And so that's what we started to notice. Basically, if you remember, it was summer and fall of 2022 when LLMs became sort of this mainstream product. And now, in a subtle way, what it also did, not only was the AI becoming a lot better, but users' perception of the AI was changing too. This time around, because the AI is so good, the users' adoption of chatbots or conversational agents is really high. Users love it, right? Because it works. And so that sort of changed the user perception. So then it sort of convinced us, roughly, around the fall of 2022, about a year and a half ago, that we should pivot back to our original mission of building these conversational shopping assistants that we had sort of paused to go after this conversational marketing product. So we came back to our original mission and started working with these LLMs to build these conversational shopping assistants.
I do think that just coming from, I'm a millennial chatbot era, we were always like, oh, let me just talk to a real person. And now it's like, I don't even want to talk to a real person. Just let me have the computer tell me exactly what I need to hear. So it's so funny how things evolve and change. And that's kind of the theme of this episode. It's like, what was it before and what is it now and where is it going? For you guys, your plans shifted and you realized that there was, enough evidence here to invest in something like this, like a conversational tool. So I guess for retailers and brands that want to stay on the cutting edge, how do you see conversational commerce actually fitting into their tech stack, and why is it crucial to pay attention to right now?
I think the key observation here, which is not a surprise, everybody recognizes, is this consumer adoption, consumer excitement about conversationally working with a business. If you think about it, conversations are the oldest and the most natural way for humans to interact with each other. Thousands of years, that's how users. Now, the reason e-commerce in particular has sort of evolved as this point, search, click. If you think about going to an e-commerce website, really what you're doing is pointing, clicking, or searching sometimes. The reason it has developed like that is because the technology, these e-commerce websites couldn't talk to us. Because left to the user, they would really, if you walk into a store, what do? If you have a question, you go to a product advisor, or the product advisor comes to you, you ask a question, they take you to an aisle, they help you shop, right? But digitally, it hasn't been like this because there was not, that AI wasn't there. So the real thing that the practitioners have to now understand is this conversational AI now works. This is how users want to interact with you. And guess what? Very quickly, as a significant percentage of the revenue that digital e-commerce companies will make will be what we call conversation assisted. And so that's coming very soon. And the practitioners have to start getting familiar with the conversational commerce technology now so that they can grab a fair share of that conversation-assisted revenue that's just coming down the road.
It's cool that the data is showing us that that's what people are craving, and they're craving that more personal touch. And obviously we're all about personalization at Bloomreach. And so we're always trying to talk to retailers about how are you making that experience personalized? And I think this is just going that extra step. It's like having an Apple Genius Bar assistant right in your pocket or right on the site that actually answers their questions and actually gives them the information that they need, not like, oh, let me think about it, and then spits out something that you could have found on Google. So I think it's just getting so much more advanced. But that leads me to my next question in terms of the fact that it's relatively still new to the majority of people out here. How do you think brands are thinking about it incorrectly? Are they not seeing the full potential of the technology yet? Where do you feel like there's a gap?
I think there's a couple of things that I often find brands sort of not fully appreciating. One is traditionally conversational commerce had been about customer support. And now conversational commerce is very much capable of assisting users in purchase, and therefore it's a revenue driver. And that takes brands some time to appreciate. And once they understand that, they're super excited because who doesn't want to use, new technology to boost your revenue? So that's number one. So, pre-purchase shopping assistant as opposed to just customer support. The second confusion sometimes we notice is the following. Every brand has played with ChatGPT. So they're familiar with the power of AI. And in fact, oftentimes you can go to ChatGPT and ask for shopping assistance, right? So their mental thinking is, hey, how hard can it be to adapt this already available AI technology to work for their website? And it turns out it's not an easy problem technically, because really what you're trying to do is to harness these LLMs to only work on your product catalog, work on your content, meaning the brand's content, right? In a brand safe way, don't hallucinate, talk in brand's own voice. So these are all very non-trivial problems. You can't just make an API call to ChatGPT and it'll start talking about all kinds of other things that as a brand you don't want it to talk about. So that's sort of the second thing is brands sometimes don't appreciate how hard this technical problem is. And the third thing is I would say the biggest blind spot that currently brands have is their content, because ultimately your shopping assistant is only as good as the content you provide to it. Like the content is your product catalog, how rich is it? Outside of product catalogs, do you have technical manuals and all kinds of content? And very soon, the AI will be fine. But if they don't have enough content, rich content, to power these conversations, the experience won't be very good. So a big part of our emphasis at Bloomreach is to help brands unlock a lot of the content that's currently not visible on their website. Because website you can only show like brief descriptions and an image because you don't want your website to be cluttered. But guess what? In your back room, you have a ton of content. So I think that not having enough content to enable this rich conversational interaction is probably the third thing that brands sometimes ignore and that we want to emphasize and help them sort of bring along.
I often think of this podcast as just a way to give the marketing practitioners or even merchandisers just an unfair advantage at their job. That's what we want to do. And I think conversational commerce, can it be that unlock for practitioners in e-commerce? And if so, how do you suggest we start familiarizing ourselves with it? I think those key tips and key misconceptions are so key. And a lot of people listening will probably be like, yes, that makes sense. But how do we try to bring this in-house for brands and get leadership buy-in? Like what's the sell here if we've kind of noticed the problems that we're trying to solve for, but then also just kind of saying it's not that easy to fix?
I'll make a hot take here. I think in 2 years' time, I imagine maybe 20 to 25% of digital revenue may end up being conversation assisted. And these brands and the leadership have to recognize that if they don't start to understand this technology today, because remember the other part of, other thing to appreciate is you can't just get an off-the-shelf conversational commerce tool and get it to work instantly. That tool you have to start learning the capabilities of it, how it works. Most importantly, you have to customize it with your content, your use cases, your voice. So it will take time for you to perfect it. And if a significant portion of the digital revenue is going to be conversation assisted, and if you are not tinkering with this technology today, knowing fully well that it will take you some time to perfect it for your use cases and your site, you are left behind.
Last year at the Edge Summit, I was there and we gave a little bit of a tease on how it could possibly work. And we gave a real life example with Total Wine. And that was really impactful and powerful to see how it works in real time in real life. Someone was searching for a bottle of wine to take to a dinner party. And it was just this really cool experience where you didn't have to guess and they gave you everything you needed. And I feel like it's just having a real life assistant in your pocket, just kind of ready to handle whatever you're looking for. So that's why I really wanted to get you on to talk about it as a whole. And I'm shameless plug, but we do have a product coming out. And we're kind of teasing it now, but I do want to hear from your end. It's not an easy process. It does take a little bit, but actually getting in there and playing with it is so key. So if you're already a customer, that might be a little easier, but kind of getting familiar with it, you're listening to this podcast, so you're already on the right track, which is great. But for someone who might be wondering, when it comes to budget for a tool like this, is it expensive? What would the line item be in the budget for brands for this tool? And do you you see it becoming its own category, or does it lump in with something else?
We think there are two ways the conversational commerce sort of manifests or touches the end user. The first way is as part of the marketing campaign, and we call it the tip of the spear, tip of your marketing spear, so to speak. Right? So imagine you're running marketing campaigns over email and SMS and even on-site marketing and merchandising campaigns. And really you want the user who engages with your campaign to have the ability to ask questions and have something like a conversational product guide them from a marketing message to a purchase. Right? So that's sort of one path. And then the other path is search and discovery path, where the user comes in to your website and they're searching for a product. And then you say, well, this kind of query is better served conversationally, right? So you have sort of two approaches. And to your budget question, in the beginning, conversational commerce will be sort of like a subline item for each of your two entry points, if you will, marketing or search and discovery. And by the way, again, a shameless plug, Bloomreach, those are the two big pillars for Bloomreach is engagement and search and discovery. And so that's why Clarity's or conversational commerce is such a nice fit for us. But to answer your question, really in the beginning, it will be like a little test budget within your marketing budget and your search and discovery budget. And then with time, it absolutely becomes its own standalone line item in your budget, simply because it will be driving so much of the revenue that you're making that it will just have to be its own conversational line item in your budget.
Speaking of advancements, I'm thinking about all of the things that will be available for us 2 years down the road from now. So I guess if you were to predict the next major shifts in this space, conversational commerce in particular, what comes to your mind? What gets you excited? What are you thinking about this?
That's the most exciting part of this job. This technology is changing so fast. So to start with, what we are providing is a chat conversation, text conversation. But very quickly, you see where this is going. Conversations are multimodal. You want to, and it's not like voice is always the appropriate conversation medium. A lot of times, text is like, even in our real life, we don't always call somebody. Sometimes we text them, sometimes we call them, sometimes we video call them, right? It just depends on the situation. So it'll be the same with conversational shopping assistants. They will have to be multimodal. The user may say, I found this photo of a dress. Do you have something similar to this? Or, so it'll be two-way multimodal conversation. The new wave of content is going to be geared at conversational. How do I provide rich, raw information to my conversation assistant so that it has everything it needs to answer users' questions? Because the user will ask questions like, well, is this face cream going to give me acne? Right? Now, that's typically not found on a website product description. That's like somewhere in the deep, here's the reasons why it is, hypoallergenic or whatever it is, right? So you want to provide rich content. So that's sort of the other big advancement we see happening is tools and ways to enrich content, both, text and audio and video, everything, so that the conversational assistants become more useful.
Well, content is such a beast in general because you've got written content, like you said, you've got the video content. It has to be robust in order for this to work in the right way. And I just think about myself when I go into, say, Sephora, and I don't know a ton about makeup or skincare, and I need all of the details. They're carrying so many products. It's like, okay, I need to know. And like you said, like, is this retinol going to help me, anti-age, not age quickly? And it's something where it pulls something that you have already written about it, the anti-aging properties. And really customers just ask about their problems and how these products can fix it. Or in the case that you've been bringing up is the red dress or something like that. Like I'm searching for a white beach dress. And it's like, okay, let me know what would be best based on my body type maybe, or based on where I'm going. So there is so much potential for this. And I think we see it a lot just in the way we shop now, but I feel like if it only gets better, that gets me excited as well, just as a consumer, but also as someone who tries to stay on top of the technology advancements. But that's speaking to my next question, and you kind of already touched on this, so maybe you can add a little color here. But as a marketer myself, content, like we talked about, is key, and that's going to be part of the strategy. So I think you touched on that. But merchandising, I guess, how do you see it evolving within the merchandiser strategy? Is it the updating of product descriptions? Is it making sure that they have everything that it needs to move whatever products to the top of the page? I mean, I know we help with that, but I guess, can you elaborate a little bit more on the merchandising strategy?
No, 100%. I think, by the way, on the content part, there's something else that is somewhat subtle, but I wanted to point that out. The content that the assistant needs is not just your product content. Imagine if you walk into Sephora, you want the sales assistant to not just know about the products that Sephora sells. You almost want them to be a makeup expert, or you want them to provide you tips about that vertical that have nothing to do with the product. Like you walk into a gardening store or a Home Depot, you want that person to be an expert in a certain area. So you want content to develop that kind of expertise in your virtual sales assistant also. So it's not just about product; it's content about product. Anyway, coming back to merchandise, your question about merchandising. So as you know, merchandising is sort of this subset of higher level marketing, where it is very focused on the product-based activities. Creating product content, marketing specific products, recommending certain specific products, all of that. And that's where we think because shopping assistants are really trying to help you find the right product, answer your question. So we think over time, remember I said shopping assistants or conversational commerce is sort of the tip of your marketing spear, right? So every marketing campaign, at the end of it, imagine there's a conversational assistant that's helping users. So the specific set of marketing that it will first help you with is product-related marketing. So whenever you are suggesting a product to the user on your app, which is typically what a merchandiser does, is say, hey, how do I show a recommended product? Or how do I send an SMS to a user, marketing a specific product that I think that the user would be interested in? Or how do I send an email about a specific product recommendation? So all of those marketing campaigns that are product specific will benefit from a conversational interaction. And so that's why the merchandisers or the product level marketers will be the first ones in the marketing universe to benefit from a conversational shopping assistant, because now they can offer that assistant at the end of, as part of all of their marketing campaigns. And that's where we are seeing the most interest amongst the marketers. And so that's how I would sort of address your question about the merchandisers and how they can benefit from conversational commerce.
I was just at the Women in Retail Leadership Summit in Amelia Island, Florida last week. And one of the brands was talking on stage about how she sees this as like kind of the future of the way people shop. And it was really cool to hear it feel like thought leadership, but also just letting everybody in the room know it's coming and it's coming fast. Like the capabilities will be beyond what you can imagine right now, just like ChatGPT became more than what anybody could imagine. So I think people are excited, and brands, that you're talking to have expressed excitement and interest. And that's why we wanted to do this, tell all episode, just so people could get that additional information, all that they need to know, just so they can kind of make really informed decisions about how to move next. So before we go, I'd love to do a quick round of Q&A regarding the product specifically, just so people know. And like I said, people have been hearing about this tease for a while, so we're going to get down to it. We've already rolled this out to a couple of customers as of March 2024. So I just want to kind of get your thoughts, and we'll keep it short and fun, and if that's okay with you. Okay. All right. So first one, what is Clarity? And at a high level, what problem are we solving?
Yeah, basically Clarity is a virtual sales assistant, multi-channel. To start with, it will live on your website, And then very soon we'll add sort of an SMS version of it, and Messenger and WhatsApp, all of the messaging channels. But basically, it's a virtual sales assistant that guides your customers or your users to a purchase.
Perfect. Name your favorite Clarity use case as of today. I know it's early, but anything that you're seeing that you could share.
We have an abandoned cart use case. Imagine if a user has abandoned a cart on your site and you want to guide them to a purchase from that abandoned cart. There's another one we call considered purchase, where imagine we can detect if a user is looking at a lot of different varieties of your products, and we can guess that they are considering, it's not a quick decision for them, they're thinking about a purchase. And then based on that, we want to then surface Clarity and help them make that decision and make the purchase. And then there's a traditional conversational search. Imagine a user comes in and starts to type a search query in your search box. Some of those queries may be ideally suited through a conversation rather than, hey, here's 5 products. For example, if you come in and say, I'm looking for a red dress under $100, like if you're very specific, we'll surface you search results. But imagine you come and say, I'm looking for I'm going to a wedding and I'm looking for a gown. Now you really need a conversation because you want the assistant to ask you, what kind of wedding is it? And what's the weather like? And then give you certain recommendations. So, that's what we call a conversational search use case, where we detect, hey, this question is better answered using a conversation rather than, boom, here are your products. So I would say abandoned cart, considered purchase, and conversational search. Those would be some of my, go-to use cases.
Third question. Suppose a customer asks our AI shopping assistant for recommendations on maybe a last minute gift. How does it suggest personalized options quickly and effectively? Is it happening super fast?
Yeah, it is. Everything because it's all AI, it's all automated, it's fast. There's no human delay involved in this. You don't have to wait for an assistant to show up on your number 23 in the queue. No, AI is available for everybody. So, but to answer your question, I think the real key part of sort of this recommendation problem is for the AI to understand, hey, should I give an answer or should I ask a question? Because I already gave you an example. If you come in and say, I'm looking for a gift, well, it's probably not good for AI to say, here are 5 gifts. AI wants to ask questions. So AI is not just to answer questions. AI, Clarity in this case, is also there to ask questions. So I think, and knowing when to do what. So first thing is Clarity will ask you a bunch of questions about the recommendations you're looking for. And now it can personalize based on your needs, what you express. So that's sort of the other thing. Personalization happens in 2 ways. The first one is what we call the expressed expressed preferences of personalization, where the user is telling you, hey, I'm looking for a gift for my grandma who's, turning 90. And then now I'm personalizing my recommendation to what you expressed. And there's also implied personalization. If I know your history, and because we are part of the Bloomreach engagement product, we know the previous journey that this user has had through our engagement product. Now we can personalize what we are suggesting based on what we call the implied, meaning just knowing your background and your previous history, we can fine tune our recommendations. So I think that's how I would say the personalization or recommendation would be powered through Clarity.
So what happens if a customer's query contains slang or colloquial language? How does our AI shopping assistant decipher and respond appropriately? What do you think?
That's been a challenge historically with chatbots, but I think that's where the new LLM technology, imagine you go into ChatGPT and you can ask your question in any different way using slang and colloquial language, and it recognizes. So at the back end, Clarity uses LLM sort of technology, both off-the-shelf LLMs as well as our own custom LLMs or custom models. But those are great at recognizing sort of slang and all kinds of languages. By the way, Clarity is available in 20 languages. So I think that's where the new LLM technology really helps you, is to understand basically anything that the user is saying. Doesn't matter how they're expressing themselves.
2 more questions. Our audience is marketers and merchandisers, and We love data. So what would you say are some key performance indicators that demonstrate the effectiveness of the AI shopping assistant thus far?
There are several, when we speak to brands and we are sort of gauging what KPIs are of interest to them specifically around this conversational commerce. I'll list a few. First of all, the biggest one, what percentage of my revenue is being driven is this conversation assisted revenue, right? So that's like, is it moving my needle and by how much? And then sort of you work backwards from there saying, hey, what is the lift in conversion rate when a user interacts? Now imagine 100 users are coming to my website, maybe 20 of them are engaging with a conversational clarity, basically a shopping assistant, and 80 are not engaging. What is the lift in conversion rates for the users who are engaging with the conversational assistant, right? So that's sort of the other metric that they're very interested in. And then you work backwards from there and say, okay, before we can drive lift in conversion rates, we need to have engagement with the user. So many brands are also just looking at, well, if I presented clarity to 100 users, how many of them interacted with clarity? And then when they interacted, how many questions did they ask? And, so there's like, what is the breadth of engagement and what's the depth of engagement with a conversational assistant? So I'd say those are the key KPIs that they're looking at.
Finally, how does Clarity compare to what some of our competitors are doing in the market right now? What makes it different?
We spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I'd say there is the biggest differentiator, if I was to point out, is the fact that Clarity doesn't talk to every single one of your visitors. Imagine if you walked into Sephora or you walked into a Best Buy and you found a product advisor that was going to each and every user that walks into the door and is offering help. That'd be super annoying because there are a lot of users who don't need help from a product advisor, physical or digital, right? So I think the way our product Clarity is structured, and remember, Clarity is part of two pillars that we have, product pillars we have. One is engagement, marketing/engagement, and the other is search and discovery. Now imagine in the marketing version of Clarity, we basically carefully, so it's very use case driven. So I mentioned a couple of use cases like abandoned cart, considered purchase. So Clarity surfaces in a very use case driven way. And within each use case, it identifies the user saying, hey, this user, based on these criteria, I have determined that they are a good candidate for conversational assistance. Not every user is, but based on our engagement technology, we can detect, hey, this user is the perfect candidate to offer. Because there are two reasons you don't want to offer it to every user. One is, of course, you don't want to be annoying. And second is there's costs involved. Every LLM technology, there's some costs involved. So you need to have the ROI in mind. Hey, if I provide AI-driven conversation to this user, I will get a good ROI on it, right? It's sort of like same thing. If you've got a limited number of product advisors in Best Buy or Sephora, and you want them to be spotting, hey, this user, based on maybe they're going to this aisle and they spent 5 minutes in this aisle and they're looking, I think they're confused. Let me go offer my help, right?
They need help.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of the digital equivalent of that is, so that's big. A lot of the current products in the market are a little chatbot. You go in and we're not a chatbot. We are a sales assistant that pops up on your site when it knows this user needs help. And then it's sort of like a smart product advisor who walks up to you and says that perfect first opening question that gets you drawn into the conversation, right? So it's that equivalent in the digital world is sort of as needed conversational use case. Similarly on the search and discovery product, not every question that the user types in is a good question for a conversational answer. Some questions are just standard search answers are fine. So we will have this logic that says, okay, this conversation, this question is good. So on both sides, this idea that only provide conversational help when needed is a big differentiator for Clarity compared to others. And then internally, in terms of the tech, because we are so e-commerce focused and we have a lot of data, so we use some of that data to create our own custom models. So our conversational assistant is very focused on commerce use cases and some off-the-shelf models, but many custom models so that's sort of the inside clarity differentiation. And then there's the outside, meaning how it presents itself to the user in sort of an as-needed way. That's, I would say, is the big differentiator for us.
I'm sure brands will be excited to hear all of the details that you've given us today. This has been a really insightful discussion. I'm really excited to see what's come. So thank you so much again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for listening to the Commerce Experience podcast. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate our show 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate you all and couldn't make this happen without your support. Until next time, bye.